Hi, and welcome to Can You Just Sit With Me? Where I discuss hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope during the challenging times of life. I am your host, Natasha Smith. Thanks so much for joining me today. So, today I want to welcome and introduce you to my friend Jennifer Thompson. She is a writer over at Truly Yours, Jen, and now a published author with an essay in a number one bestseller, So God Made a Mother. That is so exciting. So, hi, Jennifer, and welcome to Can You Just Sit With Me?
Hi, Natasha. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It is truly an honor and just so much fun to actually be talking with you because I have been following you forever and I love your writing and your words so much and the way you impact people just with your love of the Lord and your encouragement and your willingness to go to those hard places. So, talking to you is just, it brings me so much joy. So, thank you for having me.
Oh, well, that is so sweet. And I can say the same for you. I love your writing and I love your heart. And so I'm excited to have this chat with you. I just know it's going to be a powerful time. So I'm excited. And so again, this opportunity, I'm excited about this opportunity to chat with you on what is considered a hard topic, right? And we're going to be chatting about suicide today. And this topic typically many shy away from kind of discussing or talking about, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I thought, what better time to bring you on to kind of chat about this. So if you can just get us started and tell us a little bit more about yourself, and we'll kind of dive in after that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I agree. It's not the easiest topic to discuss, but it is such an important topic to discuss. So I'm glad that we can go to those hard places together. But yeah, so my name is Jennifer Thompson. I am a mother and wife. I have four children, three girls and a boy. And my husband and I have been married for almost 20 years, which is pretty exciting. He is my best friend, the love of my life. And my kids are 17, 15, 13, and almost 11. My son will be 11 in June. So we are kind of in that real crazy time of life that, a lot of time spent in the car and running from here to there. But it's really fun. Like I'm loving this phase and this stage. And I'm also a freelance writer. I love to write. That's kind of what I do. And it brings me an immense amount of joy. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I love that so much. I don't even know if I knew you had 4 kids. I'm sure I've seen pictures, but for you to hear you sound like she has 4 kids.
Yeah. Well, and how many do you have? You have four
4,
too,
yeah,
right? Yeah, that's what
uh-huh,
I thought.
and
Yeah.
they're similar in age range. Your oldest is 17?
Mhm.
Yeah, my oldest is 16, and then the youngest is 7, though, so
Oh
but
yeah, we're right there
yeah,
in that same
mhm,
wheelhouse. So yeah,
mhm,
you feel all of the same things that I'm talking about then.
exactly.
It's a
Yeah,
lot of fun, but it can be a lot of work sometimes.
right, yeah, that balance, but it's fun times, like you said.
Yeah,
It's
it
true.
is. It is. It's a joy to be able to watch them grow.
So, if we can kind of dive in, if you're ready to dive in into your grief story and what is, and I say grief story, but just the story behind like the topic, what we're talking about today, and what do you want to share about suicide and just chat with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, sadly, I had my first kind of personal, I guess, experience with suicide when I was in um, seventh grade. My grandpa Max took his life. He struggled with depression and alcoholism, and he took his life. And I remember vividly during the funeral, I sat with my aunt's fiance, and he talked to my sister and I just about just the tragedy of death by suicide and how he couldn't believe anybody would do that. And then a couple months later, he took his life by suicide also. Um, and then the following year, one of my really good friends in high school, her brother committed suicide. And so just at a pretty young age, I personally just started to kind of understand just the impact of that suicide is a very real thing. Um, and I have known other people since that have sadly taken their lives, but most recently, in on August 28th, I received a phone call from both my mom and my sister were on the line, and my best friends from high school had been visiting that weekend. They had just left, maybe an hour earlier. So I was just in this place when I picked up that phone of just, I had had the best weekend with my girlfriends, just, feeling really full and just so full of joy and happiness. And I picked up the phone and I knew in a second that something was horribly, horribly wrong because I could hear them both sobbing. And my sister just started kind of yelling into the phone, "Brad is dead." And Brad is my cousin who he's a Marine, or had been a Marine for many years and had struggled with depression and post traumatic stress disorder. And when I heard those words that my sister said, I just immediately just fell to the floor. Like I just dropped to the floor and just started, kind of wailing. It was very raw grief. It was very that kind of grief that just like you cannot contain it. Um, my daughter, my oldest, Sophia, was the only one home at the time, and she came running down the stairs, and she kind of covered me, like she covered me, and then she was crying too. Even though she didn't really know my cousin, just for her to see me in such just a real state of emotion like she had never seen before, caused her to feel that emotion too. And then later I had to wrestle with that. Like I was like, was that too much for her to see? But then I thought, no, that was not too much for her to see. That was my expression in that moment of finding out somebody that I love so much is no longer here. And so we had some good conversations after that, because I won't go off onto this tangent, but I do think we struggle with grieving. In our
Yeah.
country in particular, we just don't know how to do it, which is I just love that you are saying sit in it, because we need to sit in it,
Mhm.
and to sit with each other and have these conversations, because we just want to be like, oh, I'm moving on now. Like
Yeah.
I'm just going on to the next thing. It's like we have an appropriate time frame where we think we can grieve in this box, but grief lasts. I still am crying. I will continue. I will cry over the loss of my cousin,
Mhm.
um, for maybe ever. I really. It's so sad that he's gone. But just to tell you a little bit about Brad's backstory. So, the last time I saw him was at his brother's wedding, the October before he took his life. And he was very, very transparent about his depression. He was very transparent about his struggles. When he was deployed in Afghanistan, he had um, some friends that he had sent out on a mission, and they they were killed in that mission, and they never came back. And he carried the weight of that. He felt personally responsible for their death. And even when I saw him at my cousin's wedding, he talked to me about this. He very openly talked about the dark place that he was in. But in our conversation, I was like, Brad, I'm worried about you. And he promised. He said, I promised you I would never do anything. He has children, and he even said, he's like, I have my girls, I won't do this. And for me in that moment, I was like, okay, that's enough. I believe him. Like I believe him. And I believe that he believed that in that moment.
Right.
He did believe that. But he just couldn't. He was suffering so much. And actually, when he did choose to take his life, that same weekend, he and his wife had been he was his second wife. They were kind of newly married and they were having some struggles and they were supposed to go on a marriage retreat, but he ended up getting COVID. And so then he was isolated in the basement for an extended period of time and drinking. And it was just kind of this perfect
Yeah.
storm, just this perfect storm. But it really opened my eyes um, after losing Brad to the fact that our vets in particular, I mean, suicide is a growing problem with all, I would imagine, most populations, but I know that population in particular, there is just there's such a drastic increase, and I just think that they come back, and it's just so hard, not for everybody, but for people like my cousin. And just like you said, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I'm just so glad that we have times when we are focusing more on mental health. So I don't know what the answers are, but I know it's a real problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just miss him, and I'm just sad. And also when it's suicide, you have some different things attached to it. I don't know that everybody does, but for me, there was some guilt, So I should have followed up more. I knew he was depressed. I shouldn't have just taken him at his word. There's more of that kind of like, what could I have done?
Yeah.
Why didn't I see it coming? But I know in my heart, like there was nothing, and I think that's just something that when people are grieving a suicide, there are just some extra layers, maybe some
Mhm.
shame. Like some people might have some shame attached to it. None of that. Like the Lord does not want us to carry any of that. That is not what He wants us to carry. But I think sometimes, sadly, you have to kind of work through that in
Mhm.
addition to working through the grief, some of those kind of extra
Yeah.
feelings.
This is so true. It's so hard, and I'm so sorry,
Thank you.
just so sorry, so hard. And it's like you said, it's so much and so many different types of emotions that come along with it. And like you said, guilt and shame are a few of those. I actually had a cousin who took his life, and but this is when I was in college,
Mm.
and but we went to high school. Well, we grew up together because his dad and my dad were brothers, and so we were really close from the standpoint. I mean, we grew up together. We were like brothers and sisters, kind of. And, when I had heard of his death, that he took his own life, it was such a shock, nobody talks about this stuff.
Mm-mm.
Like, even today, really, like, no one has ever really talked about it, even till this day, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
it's really sad because it's a loss, and we have to process the loss, but I think it makes it even more difficult when we have a loss by suicide because, society and our culture really does not deem it as a loss worthy of grieving,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
makes it that much heavy because it's like, well, this could have in their minds, people may not say it, but it's like, well, this could have been prevented, or, or this didn't have to happen. So it is a little bit less worthy of grieving, which is not the case. And I actually have a chapter in my book on invisible grief.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That will touch so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're right, it isn't talked about. And there's a lot of negative, maybe stigma attached
Yes.
to it. And
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear about your cousin too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so hard. And even listening to you talk about your cousin, that is how our family was too. Like we grew up, we always lived right next to each other.
Mhm.
Like, right, we were not only family, but we were
Mhm.
neighbors. And yeah, we were just together all of the time. And
Mhm.
even though as we grew older, we didn't see each other nearly as much as we would have liked to, there is something about just growing up with
Yeah.
a family member that just you have this closeness and this bond that that's just unbreakable,
Yeah.
it's really so strong. And that makes it that just adds, to that pain. And one of the things that I've realized too with grief for me personally that I'm trying to just pray for the Lord to help me with this. I qualify. Like I feel like I have to qualify my grief. Like, well, like we were this close, so I'm allowed to grieve this much. Or, it's like I want to say, I feel like I do I whenever I lose someone I love, it's like I have to give myself permission to grieve their loss by saying, "Well, it's okay that I feel this way because A, B, and C." And I don't know
Right.
if that's a common thing, but again, I think that goes back to the fact that we don't grieve well. So
Yes.
we feel like we have to give ourselves permission and time limits, and we were this close, so I can't grieve this long. And I don't
Mhm.
know. Does that make sense? Do you know
It
what I'm
does
talking about?
totally. Yep. It's totally like I have a whole section in the book about it.
Oh, do
I
you? I
really
can't wait to read this book.
I really do because that's what we do. We've been conditioned by, how we grew up, what we see in culture, what culture feeds us, what we've seen our parents do, So I thought it was interesting how you brought up, what did my daughter think in that moment? And
Mhm.
so we take in all these things and then we form the way we grieve. So no one comes and say, this is how you should grieve. We have kind of brought all these things in, and that is it kind of innately um makes us grieve the way that we grieve. But
Yeah.
until we acknowledge, like, this I don't know if this is healthy, or I don't know if this is the right way, until we kind of say, I think I should be doing something different to process this, then we will continue to kinda do what we've always been doing or have seen others do.
Yeah,
That
that
makes
makes good sense. Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes really good sense. Well,
Yeah.
and to hear you say that, it just reiterates I am grateful that my daughter
Yeah.
that I didn't hide that from her,
Yes.
because hopefully she'll learn that it's okay. Like there are some things that are so sad that they do bring you to your knees,
Yes.
and that's okay. And you
Yeah.
can stay down there for as long as you need to. I feel like that the Lord really meets us in those moments. And I felt his presence most definitely, even with her,
Mhm.
sorry, even with her like running down the stairs and covering me. Like, even though she's my daughter and I'm the one that's usually, but just there was something about that that was just really precious in that moment. Um, so yeah, I thank you for saying what you said because that
Yeah.
does just reiterate that it's it's okay to let our
Mhm.
kids see these things.
I love that so much, and I was just gonna bring that back up again. Just that picture is in my head now, of like you saying your daughter covering you, and I really feel like the Lord uses our kids in these moments to really help us. We're helping them by showing them that it is okay to show emotion. It is okay to grieve. Like you
Mhm.
said, we've lost someone who we will not see again until glory, until
Yeah.
heaven, and it hurts. And so to hide that is to show them we can't cry. You shouldn't
Yeah.
cry, you know?
Oh,
It's
and to not cry, that would just be awful.
awful, right? Oh my gosh. But to be honest, all transparency here, I've done it for years, meaning hide my
Like,
emotion from
hid
my
hid
kids.
hid the emotion.
Yeah, anytime that I had a griefy moment, I would run to the other room,
Mhm.
and it literally wasn't until 2020, like, I have grief stories spanning back from, 30 plus years,
Mhm.
but 2020 was the year that I was, like, kinda like the first time that I let my kids see me cry,
Oh, wow.
and then
Was that
kinda
freeing? Was it freeing?
it was. It was, and the crazy thing is, it was my five-year-old at the time who came because I could. the tears came so fast that I couldn't leave the room, for one.
You're like, there's no stopping them.
Exactly. And so she came and grabbed my arm. She's like, "Mama, what's wrong?" And at the time I was thinking about my sister. It was my sister's birthday. And I was like, Mommy's sad because I want to celebrate with my sister, but she's not here." And then she's like, "It's okay, Mommy." And I was like, so she was giving me permission to grieve. And so,
Oh,
yeah.
that is
So,
a beautiful story. And
yeah.
I love hearing that. Like, I just keep thinking your book is going to bless so many, even that you have that experience of hiding the grief and then learning how to bring it out. I feel like so many people are going to be able to relate to that story
Yeah.
because that's what I think a lot of us do.
Yeah.
Stuff it, silence
Yeah.
it. But I've realized, like, I want to talk about it because I want to talk about these things. I want to talk about Brad, and I think another thing that we do, not just with suicide, but kind of we stop talking about the people. It's like it's like you don't want to bring it up because you don't know where that person is. So then people just stop asking.
Yep.
Sharing the stories. Like my since Brad has passed, my cousin and his wife and my aunt and uncle, they've come to visit us at various times over the past year. And we have just told the stories. We tell the stories and we laugh and there's tears too, but it's so good to remember, just to remember this beautiful life of this person that you love that's not here anymore. And so I just really I love talking about him, and I feel very passionate about just talking about suicide too, because there are so many people that are suffering in silence and so many people that are struggling with mental health, and we need to be able to have the conversations. And hopefully the more that we have the conversations, lives can be saved if
Yeah.
people feel like they can say, like, hey, I am in this dark place, like to be able to say that. But I do want to say, and I have some statistics too that you and I had talked about that I wanted to share. The first thing I thought was really interesting is that 1 in 4 adults know or care about someone who attempted or died by gun suicide. So this in particular is gun suicide. Brad took his life by gun suicide. And veterans are at 57% higher risk of suicide than those who haven't served, which I think is a staggering statistic. 6,146 veteran suicides happened in 2020. There have been 20 consecutive years with 6,000 plus veteran suicides. And 125,000 plus veterans have died by suicide since 2011. And this is the second leading cause of death in veterans under the age of 45 is death by suicide. So I think those were kind of the big ones that I wanted to share. And the other big thing, I guess, too, is just the transition experience. This website is called Stop Soldier Suicide, and they specifically talk about that more than 40% of veterans say they experience high levels of difficulty when transitioning. And studies show that those individuals are 5 times more likely to experience suicidal ideation. So that period of time when they come home is just a really, just a time, I think, to be aware of. And then more than 45% of veterans with combat experience describe transition as difficult, compared to 18% of veterans with no combat experience. So again, that just kind of goes back to Brad in particular. The things that happened, he couldn't process, could not move past those things. And he was even on, he was on suicide watch too. I mean, so they were aware, but it's just one of those things that I don't know what could have been done differently. It reminds me, I did have something I wanted to say because this I thought was very interesting too.
Yeah.
that there is research that they're showing there are ways to potentially help if somebody is suicidal. And with guns in particular, it's so these are 5 gun access interventions for preventing gun suicide, and this is from Everytown. So number one is in-home storage. Store firearms unloaded, locked, and separate from ammunition. So I actually attended like a conference about vets and suicide, and they did talk about the fact that if your gun is stored in one place and your ammunition is in another place, just that walk from one to the other is enough time for a lot of people that will slow down the mind and bring back to a place of, oh wait, I don't want to do that. So just simply having those in different places can save lives. Save lives. The second one is give the keys. So in times of crisis, give the keys to the storage device to a trusted friend or family member. So again, that's for that person that's just really in that dark place. And that takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to be able to come forward and say, I am struggling with suicidal ideation. I mean, that is a brave space to be. But again, a life can be saved by giving the key to somebody else. The third thing is out of home storage. So voluntarily store your firearms outside of your home, such as at a gun dealer or with an eligible family member. The fourth is voluntary prohibitor. So in some states, people in crisis can voluntarily block themselves from purchasing and in some cases possessing a firearm for a limited period of time. So like if you know you're in this space, you can contact them and say, hey, don't let me buy a gun. Like don't let me. And that's not like a forever thing. It's just, and that will be respected. That's in some states. An extreme risk protection order. In some states, loved ones or law enforcement can intervene by petitioning a court for an order to temporarily prevent someone in crisis. So sometimes I think we feel powerless if we feel like somebody is in that space that we know. But in some states, you can have their guns temporarily removed. And I know that there are other ways that people take their lives. But this is just, that was Brad's, what happened with Brad. So that is particularly just in particular what I was focusing on. But yeah.
I love the, just like I said, I'm not a big stats person, meaning like me grabbing the numbers, but I love stats in the sense that it does inform us and it makes us aware of a lot of things, right? It's kind of hard to hear the statistics, and it's kind of sad. And it's like, what can we do, to help? And so it does make me sad that so many have suffered from this. And because we know when there's a loss of life, there's a upward 7+ people who are like directly affected by that. And so, you and your family are grieving from this. And so it's just hard sometimes to hear those type of statistics because I'm thinking about all the lives that have been impacted by this. And so, again, just thankful that you have shared them here so that we all can be aware. And if nothing else, we can think about vets and we can pray even more specifically in this area for them. But I love also that there are some things like what you shared, practical things, some practical things that I wasn't aware of, but now I'm aware of, and all those that'll be listening can be aware of that can possibly help save a life.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. You can feel powerless, especially if you know somebody that you love is hurting. I mean, even when Brad shared how, like I said, he was very open about his pain.
Yeah.
But there was that feeling like, what can you do? What can you do other than reach out? And so it has been good for me just to learn, okay, there are some things. There are some things you can do. There are some things, some conversations that you can have.
Mm.
It may not always change the outcome, and we are not responsible for that. But there are things, and in regards to the vets in particular, this is kind of a side note, but
Mhm.
it's it's kind of sad that it's taken this to make me feel this deep sense of gratitude toward the people that serve and protect and care for our country in that way. But now it's like if I see someone, I am like, thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you for your service, because there are so many sacrifices that are made on so many levels that I can't personally understand. Um, but it's amazing how the Lord uses our grief and our sadness just to bring things just to our attention, and just like I never ever had these kinds of feelings when I saw the people that serve. And I'm sorry to admit that, but it is true.
Mhm.
But now I'm just like, oh Lord, like you said, just praying for their protection. Um, just just hoping that for those transitions when they come back that they'll be
Yeah.
smooth, and
Mhm.
just it opens your eyes when you lose someone you
Mhm.
love. It opens your eyes to things that had not been open to before. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Absolutely. That's so true. Mhm. And and I think sometimes it's hard to kinda think that way from a standpoint of, um, kinda like you're saying, "I hate that I didn't see it before," you know?
Yeah.
But God does use the things, all things to help, grow us in a sense, in a way, in a new way to for him to use us to
Yeah.
help others, and he'll use something as tragic as this and just loss, pain, suffering to, bring a new awareness of who he is and, how we can help others, in and through their pain. And like you said, even to really save a life, you
Yeah.
know?
That's the hope and the prayer. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is. That's the hope and the prayer, is
Mhm.
that lives will, I mean, it's tragic. Like,
Yeah.
all it's hard. All death is very
Yeah.
hard, but there's just those layers. They're like we
Yeah.
talked about. They're just those layers when it's suicide.
Mhm.
But I hope and pray too that the shame is removed,
Yeah.
and even for people that
Mhm.
are struggling. Like, honestly, if anybody is watching or listening to this and you have any form of suicidal ideation, you are not alone.
Yeah.
There are so many people that struggle, and I just hope and pray that there people are struggling, that they aren't in a place of shame, that they can bring that from the darkness into the light and speak those words, if only to one person,
Yeah.
just to one person, and get the help that is needed, and just to know that they are not walking that road alone, that it is a road that a lot have walked before and a lot are currently walking, and there is help, there is hope.
Yeah.
There's hope. Nothing is so bad.
Yeah.
Nothing is so bad. There is, it's like the rainbow after the storm. Even in the most desperate times, there is hope. There is, um and actually I forgot, I did have a number. I didn't even realize that if somebody is struggling with feeling
Yeah.
suicidal or in a state of crisis, you can dial 988. I didn't know that. Did you know that? I
Just
didn't.
those just
Just
that?
just 988. It's not 911. It's 988. You dial 988 and somebody will be there to help.
Yeah. I still feel so strongly that this is just such a needed conversation and just, like, so much more, I think it's more impactful than we know in this moment, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like it's a start of, again, just bringing more awareness to it because it's just not talked about that much, and maybe we can have more conversations about this.
I would love to have more
Yeah.
conversations about this, and
Mhm.
because I do feel very, very passionately and very strongly about this,
Mhm.
and just from my own personal
Yeah.
loss and grief, the grief that I'm feeling now. It's yeah, it's just hard. It's just
Yeah. And maybe before we kind of wrap up, can you, I know it's hard, but can you describe like the feelings that you felt when, you kind of described it a little bit when, like the first
hard.
onset of it, when you got the call, but what, like you're continuing to grieve this loss, this particular loss. In what ways do you find yourself grieving it?
Hmm, that's a very good question. Um, it hits at different times. He actually Brad, there were two services, two memorials for Brad. We had one in Colorado shortly after he died. That's where my family lives, my aunt, uncle, and cousins, and because he was buried in Arlington, which is just such an honor because his life was a life of service, and although he did not die on a battlefield, he did. To me, it was kind of like a death by combat, but not really. But like he gave his life for our country. He did, and so we didn't know when you're buried in Arlington. They kind of give you a window, but you don't know exactly when. So we didn't want to have to wait so long. So that's why there was the one in Colorado, and then the Arlington service was just the most beautiful service I have witnessed in my life. It was just such an honoring moment. So that was like just a really strong grief point, but in a really just beautiful way, just to see him honored in that way. But in my day to day, I actually have this sitting right here next to me. So I have this journal. One of the things that my uncle said at both of his services, he said, every week, if you could perform one act of kindness in memory of Brad's life. Ever since his first service, I have recorded every week acts of kindness that I am just doing in his honor. And so for me, part of the grieving his life is just paying his life forward. And
Oh,
just like he brought a lot of joy and to so many. And like even I just the stories that I heard after he passed away, like I had one uh old neighbor and friend of mine reach out and tell me this story that Brad is, I'm probably going to butcher this, but there was a family that he was close to, and they had lost loved ones. And so every year when he would come back to Indiana for Christmas, he would go on Christmas Eve in his uniform to this family and just be with them and just talk about, their loss. And like every year on Christmas Eve, he would come home and he would do that. And just things like that, like just these stories. And so like for me, just doing something in memory of him every week has just been a good way just to remember him, and allow that grief to it's okay. Like it's okay. And then I have moments too, where like songs, I feel like music is like a real powerful thing, and songs will come on and I will just lose it. Like it doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing. If a song comes on and it hits me. But then the other thing is just like we talked about, sharing those stories. Like I like talking about him,
yeah.
and I like talking about the fun that we had. And so I feel like that is also part of the grief process too, is
Mhm.
not being like, well, it's been however many months, so I really shouldn't talk about him anymore. No,
Yes.
no, that's not true. Like, not true at all. So thank you for asking that. I actually forgot that I had this sitting right here. So thanks for asking.
Yeah. So perfect. I love that so much. I mean, that is like I never thought about that, but that is such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way to honor him. Like, oh my gosh, that is
Yeah.
huge. And then just for anyone listening, who wants to honor, their loved one or, or thinking about ways to do so. I mean, wow, that's so beautiful. Like, I
Yeah,
can't get over it.
when my uncle said it, I was like, "Oh, Uncle Tom, that's the best. That's such a great, beautiful idea." Yeah, it was a really good idea. And so I actually, for my aunt and uncle and my cousin, I made them journals when they came to visit, like with
Mhm.
Brad's pictures, and
Mhm.
I covered the journals with pictures. And yeah, so just something for them to record it too. But I
Mhm.
don't, that could just be because, we're writers. So I
Yeah.
think there's the act. So for me personally, the act of writing something down
Yeah.
is also healing and
Yeah,
cleansing.
absolutely. Mhm,
Yeah.
that's so true. Gosh, it's so good. I love that so much. You've said so much, and I feel like it's just been such a great time. Like, what encouragement would you leave? It's maybe this is it might be two-part. So, what encouragement would you leave for someone who's grieving, the loss of someone by suicide? And then again, how would you well, maybe I'll leave it there because you kind of already given an encouragement for those who are feeling like they're in a dark place.
Yeah.
But either way, you can do both still.
I think that the encouragement that I would give to somebody who has lost somebody by suicide is it's not your fault.
Mm,
It is not your fault. There is not anything that you could have done in that instant. Um, and so just to encourage people that are holding on to that guilt or that shame, just to know it is not your fault. And I just pray that they can be released from that, and that you have permission to grieve. You have permission to grieve. And like we talked about earlier, grief is different for every single person. There is not a right way to grieve. There isn't a wrong way to grieve. There isn't a time limit on grief. So I just encourage, just like the name of your podcast, sit in it. Like it is okay to sit in it and to get help, like to talk to people. Like if you are in that place and you're finding yourself just really struggling to process, there are support groups,
mm,
there's individual therapy,
mm.
there's so many resources out there for people that are grieving loss. And just to find somebody to share with,
Yeah,
whether a professional or a friend, or just, and to go to the Lord. Like if you have that faith and you have that relation, like if you have that faith, just to know, like he wants that. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is Jesus wept. Two
yeah,
words. Two words, so powerful. The Lord knew he was going to raise his friend from the dead, and he wept for him. And so, just if the Lord is weeping, we can weep, and it's good. It is, they are cleansing tears. So just get them out. And then, like you said, just to know if somebody is in that dark place, please know help is available. And if you have a loved one who is in that dark place, just know that there are steps that you can take. Again, no responsibility falls on anybody, but there are steps that you can take that can help prevent suicide.
yeah.
So yeah.
Mm,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
Thank you so much, friend. This has been
Oh,
so,
thank
so good.
you.
I
Thank
wanna
you
ask
for having me. Like, it is such a joy. It has been a complete, just, I love talking to you. I feel like I could talk to you forever and ever. So,
Hey, close us out in prayer today. I usually don't do this. Like, I mean, I love prayer as well, but I usually don't ask um the guests to pray. So, but would
well,
you pray for us today? Like, close it in prayer.
yes, I would be honored to. Thank you. Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you so much for Natasha. God, I thank you for this space where she is willing just to go to these hard places, Lord. I thank you that we can sit with each other here and that you are sitting with us. God, I thank you that you meet us in our places of pain and grief and loss. And Lord, I thank you just for the healing that takes place when we bring the things from the darkness into the light. Father, I just pray for those whose hearts are grieving today. Lord, I pray that you will meet them and touch them in ways that they can't imagine. God, I pray that they will feel your arms just wrapping around them, Lord, and that they know that they are not alone in their grief and their sorrow. God, I just pray for those who are feeling that in that dark place, Lord, for those who are struggling with suicidal ideation. Lord, I just pray that they will know that there is help available for them. God, I pray that they will have the strength and the courage to reach out if just to one person, Lord. I pray just for breakthrough. I pray that you will just take away any lies that the enemy is telling them, Lord, that they will be replaced with truth, that they will know that they can seek help and that there is no shame in that. There is strength. For when we are weak, you are strong, Lord. And I just pray for help for those people, God. And I pray for those who have lost loved ones to suicide. I pray for those who might be struggling with guilt. Father, I pray you will remove that from them, Lord, and that they will know that they are not at fault. God, you have numbered our days. You know the things, all the things about all of us, Father. And I just pray that they can be released from that guilt, Father, and that you will just help them just to grieve this loss in a very authentic way. And Lord, finally, I just want to thank you for our vets, God, for the men and women who serve our country, Lord. I pray for protection for them mentally. I pray that you will open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to ways we can love them and serve them and care for them. I pray that you'll be with them during their transition time, Lord. I pray just for their families who are here waiting for them, Father. I thank you for this group of men and women that you have just called to this service. And I pray that we will not take their service for granted. Again, Jesus, I thank you so much for Natasha, Lord. What a blessing she is, and what a blessing this book will be. And God, I just thank you for the beauty of this day. And it is in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. So, so good.
I'm so glad I got to pray with you.
Oh, this is so amazing. Real quick, how can everyone connect with you? Because I want everyone to connect with Jennifer,
Oh, yeah, come
look
by
up all
me.
her things, buy her books, do all the things.
I am at trulyyoursjen.com. And also you can find me on Facebook, Truly Yours Jen, Jennifer Thompson, author. Instagram, Jen is under Jen Thompson, author. And yeah, I think it's also actually Truly Yours Jen, like the little whatever that symbol thing is for Instagram too. So basically, Truly Yours Jen. That's where you find me. And I have a couple of stories in the Her View from Home book, like you mentioned, and one actually is about my best friend who passed away at the age of 31. So that I have a whole story just about that grief as well, which I know we didn't touch on that, but that is what that story is about. So
you have to come back.
I'll come back.
Yeah, this has been such an awesome time. Thank you so much for sitting with me, Jen.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for listening to Can You Just Sit With Me? If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to come back for my next episode of Can You Just Sit With Me? Until then, this is Natasha Smith, helping you to find hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope in the challenging times of life. Be sure to connect with me across social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at I'm Natasha Smith.